Hi there, my name is Keith Thomas, and this is my Equity and Diversity rant on Indigenous education. So why is Indigenous education important? Well, for one thing, our Indigenous people are ever more a part of our Canadian identity than hockey, the Queen, or Tim Hortons coffee. But let me tell you something, as a person who loves history, ever since Canada became a country in 1867, it always seems that we've always tried to separate ourselves from our Indigenous people. You can observe this when you look at the Indian Act of 1878 or the formation of residential schools, which, may I add, was essentially genocide or cultural genocide that happened here in Canada. Yes, genocide. It happened here in Canada, believe it or not. But it's not your fault because, just like everything else regarding our Indigenous people, it's either been covered up or considered taboo to talk about. It was not until 2007 when how we treated our Indigenous people really took center stage. Stephen Harper formally apologized to the Indigenous people of Canada for the instances of residential schools, the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement was signed, and the formation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. Where part of this commission was a mandate to promote awareness and public education of not just Indian residential schools and its impacts, but Indigenous education all. So 10 years later, what has really changed with regards to Indigenous education? In my opinion, virtually nothing, or not enough. Yes, the Ministry of Education has provided us with the FNMI Curriculum Connections document, the Indigenous Educational Policy Frameworks, countless resources, lesson plans have all been provided to us. But what has really changed in our schools today? In the article, Witnessing Deconstruction, White Teachers' Perfect Stranger Position Within Urban Indigenous Education, teachers have been found to have a fixed mindset on how they view Indigenous people, whether that's stereotypes and whatnot, and how their own Eurocentric views dominate their teaching practices. Therefore, they're content with whatever preconceived knowledge they have about Indigenous education, and it's all they want to know and are comfortable with knowing. So last week when we talked about the case study involving Rita, the Indigenous Cree student, and how the insensitive treatment she was receiving from her teacher, I was not surprised at all. Of course, teachers still use the word Indian in their practice. In fact, in my last placement, one of my students used the terminology Indian in the classroom, and my associate teacher had no qualms about it at all. In fact, on the same placement, in one of my lessons plans, I wanted to commemorate the Anishinaabe people in whose lands we currently reside on, and my associate teacher insisted that I cut that portion out of my lesson plan, for it was unnecessary. It's not that she had anything against our Indigenous people, but it was due to the lack of being informed. But could we really blame teachers like my AT? It's not like there's pressure from administration or school boards to teach Indigenous education. How can we expect them to take a stance and include it into their teaching practice? In my opinion, we need to make Indigenous education mandatory, not just forcing it upon our teachers, but providing them with workshops and training with regards to why it is important to teach it. It just feels like the Canadian government has put a small band-aid on this huge wound, which just to pacify our Indigenous people and society as a whole. And thus, no progress has been made in how we teach our Indigenous people. Promote Indigenous education. There's an Indigenous fund provided by each school board. Use it. Invite an Indigenous leader into your school. Start a social justice club, and make Indigenous issues one of the topics to tackle as a student body. If you're into sports, start a lacrosse team. It's Canada's national sport. There's an abundance of support and resources out there. It's up to us to find it and fight for what's right. The best way to make a change is starting with our youth. So it's up to us as teachers to teach the next generation the right way and being informed and socially conscious of where we stand as a society with regards to our Indigenous people. And maybe then we might begin to consistently treat our Indigenous people the right way. Thank you.